And the title of it, it's very simple and direct and to the point. The Penn and Teller thing. It's a half hour long, but it's kind of a must watch. It's simply titled "Recycling is Bullshit."
I love it. Hey, speaking of the blog, dude, I went in there. Howsam writes it. I sometimes go in and do some edits, sometimes not, sometimes add stuff. We do the two sets of eyes better than one thing. But dude, where did you find that picture with the Chopin bottle next to the Grey Goose bottle, or did you put that together?
Actually, it's two separate pictures that are just side by side.
It's really well done, man.
Yeah, I went and I used this thing. It's called the Google, and I
So,
put in Chopin. I clicked the little button that said images, and
see,
then I
you can't. This is why you can't compliment Howsam. I mean, he compliments himself enough, but then he makes fun of you when you do it. So,
Thank you for that. And
yeah.
I do have to say, man, the Grey Goose is a good-looking bottle. I like the blue in the back, and obviously, if you had spent any time looking at the link, it says right on the front of the bottle that it's imported, made in France.
I told
Um,
you it was made in France. I told you that, but the company is a U.S. company, and they decided to distill in France. And obviously, dude, if it's made in France, connect the dots. Then if it's going to be partaken of here, it does need to be imported.
well, yeah, and I think the vodka's again, we're not rehash old ground,
No,
but
no, no,
just
no.
the fact that it's from France bugs me, so I don't eat it. I don't drink it. That's
Anyway, yeah, I'm glad you put that on there.
okay. So anyway, we can move on beyond the Keurig debacle, that potential threat to my love life, as well as recycling as bullshit in general.
hmm Did you see, by the way, Obama talking about him and his doing what he does in India, but how many times has he bragged about bringing, cutting the deficit what by a third or in half or whatever? Do you see this story? I think I sent this to you. That this is out of town hall. At least they link to where the Congressional Budget Office. As soon as dude leaves office, the deficit going to explode.
You know what? I didn't. Again, I didn't click on the link, but I saw the headline. So what's the detail? Did you put that on the thing you sent me this morning?
I think so. I was kind of firing clips at you or links at you fast and
Okay,
furiously.
so why don't you go over it?
Well, it's in fact, you and I have talked about this at least tangentially in the past, but federal deficits may have been falling since the end of the recent recession, but thanks to spending increases in, guess what, major healthcare programs like, let's translate that, Obamacare, deficits are set to explode in 2017, according to a new report by the Congressional Budget Office. By the way, a bipartisan group. Um, so it goes into the numbers and stuff, but yeah, it's what does it say? Thanks to the recent recession and Obama's trillion-dollar stimulus, federal budget deficit reached an all-time high of 1.4 trillion in 2000. So it's the same thing. It goes into how much Obamacare is going to add to the deficit. In fact, I read a different story that relates to this. Don't have it up in front of me, but another assessment that it will cost, on average, people who are covered under Obamacare and subsidized, on average, $50,000 per covered person and or family. So this is all by design, and he won't give a damn after he's gone. But I wasn't surprised at all when I read this because we've talked. I mean, you and I understand Obamacare and its implications on the economy, and I've talked around this before. It's the first time I saw something from the CBO kind of nailing the date, the year that all hell is going to break loose.
I did oh gosh, I don't know, it was a couple of months ago going through some of these long range forecasts, and they play that game with the confusion between deficit and debt.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And it just, people interchange that whole thing. Um, Nobody anywhere ever is forecasting uh, a the elimination of the deficit ever.
Or a decline in the national debt. Just for
Which
those
would
who,
be a decline in the national debt. Exactly.
yeah, so just for those who may not understand the difference, why don't you simply explain the difference between the deficit and the national debt?
Well, the deficit is simply the revenue shortfall on an annual basis between what the government spends and what the government brings in. The government debt is the accumulation of all of those deficits. So, round numbers, the government spends a dollar but brings in 80 cents. That's a deficit of 20 cents. That money has to be borrowed. And then if there is a deficit the subsequent year, let's assume it's the same way, a 20-cent deficit for the subsequent year would be added to the previous year's deficit, leaving a overall debt of 40 cents.
See, and
And
to your
that's
point,
where we are right. So what has happened recently is that the deficit has dropped, meaning the government has spent uh, closer to the money that we brought in, although there still is a shortfall. That's the number that the president has been talking about. But the reality is that we had almost $1 trillion deficit a couple of years ago. So when we had uh, literally the biggest deficits that any country has ever had in the history of the world, back to back to back to back, it was, you know, it's not a monumental task to have spent less than anybody has ever spent ever before. That's what he's taking credit for. Even
exactly.
so, the debt is continuing. The debt has literally gotten bigger since I started this particular
Well,
sentence.
because of interest alone on the debt. And to your point, I mean, liberals do this on purpose, as does he, because people don't understand the difference. When he came into office, I believe the national debt was what, 11 trillion? And it is now approaching 18.
It's
Um,
north of 18.
is it north of it now?
Yeah, it's now north of 18 trillion. And yeah, under his watch, the deficit through the end of 2014 increased. I did an article on this right after the first of the year. Um, the It's up 17, excuse me, 70%, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. On my old, well, on the old theme I used on Rat Nation, I had that. You've probably seen it, the national debt clock that
Right.
just continues to roll. I had that on the right sidebar for a couple of years or more, and so yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
Do
CBO obviously not a big, huge fan of oh, speaking of spending, did you see the Huffington Post? I sent you a link on this. Did you see the Huffington Post, the article about Obamacare to cost far less than estimated, the budget office says?
you know what? That might be the. You sent me that a bit later, didn't you? Be I have it here, I believe. Anyway,
uh,
talk about it.
yeah, well, the headline really caught my eye, which is obviously how it was written and designed to cost far less than estimated. And then you get into the weeds of it, that Obamacare is going to cost 7% less than expected over the next decade for federal subsidies to help lower it, blah, 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 blah,
I got
blah.
it.
Um, they figure it's going to cost 964 billion, which is 68 billion less than the estimate last year. So I mean, yeah, it is 7%, but we're almost talking $1 trillion. And then further into the thing, the reason is that the enrollment numbers are actually less. So they could have said Obamacare signing up far fewer than originally forecasted, which would have been true. But what they're doing is they're saying, okay, it's not. It's they're basically trying to figure out how to pick up the piece of dog poop from the clean end. In that, it's not going to cover anywhere near the number of people that they thought.
I mean, so
But
the
but
this the,
as a result of it not covering that amount of people that they thought, the costs will be therefore less, and that's what they're trumpeting as a positive.
well, and also is not this cost? Is this not related to subsidies and cost of the government, i.e., the taxpayer?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so here's another news flash. What they're not taking into account is the for those who do pay, who do not get subsidized, the tremendous increase in their premiums, the tremendous increase in deductibles, things that are no longer covered, that has an impact on this exposure by the government as well. People paying tremendously more money now and having substantially higher deductibles,
Right.
out of pocket stuff that they have to pay. So that
Right.
that factors in there as well.
Yeah, I heard a discussion. It was some analyst in California talking about that the numbers of people going to ERs is once again increasing.
Yes.
That Obamacare was supposed to solve. Because what happens is that somebody's, they signed up for Obamacare, awesome. They go in to see the doctor, and they realize, well, wait a second. Either A, you haven't paid your premiums, and therefore you don't have the coverage, or B, you have paid the premiums. That's awesome. You do have the coverage, but you're not anywhere near to your well, what is it called? The initial out of pocket that you have to pay.
Yeah, the deductible, the out of pocket stuff you have to pay.
Yeah, so the fact that they have this expensive insurance does nothing for, your normal doctor's visits that they have to pay for out of their pocket. So the people, what they're finding happening is that even the people that have signed up are turning around, leaving the doctor's office and going down to the ER where they have to get care.
It's a cluster, dude, and it's
and then, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. The cluster continues. I'm looking through this HuffPo thing. The very last sentence. Medicaid will cost the federal government $59 billion more than expected over the next 10 years as a result of higher enrollment under Obamacare, almost completely and totally eliminating the savings that the article's headline is written all around.
it's just, so you can't make it up.
So they're saying, hey, you know what? Obamacare is costing way less than we thought.
Well, and listen, this nonsense, first of all, even I take issue, it will cost the federal government. The federal government doesn't make money. The federal government exists via taxation. So that should cost American taxpayers, not the federal government. I've just always taken issue with the cost to the government.
Oh, right. It just kills me that on the front end they're trumpeting, hey, it's going to cost so much less than we thought. Well, because there's so many fewer people enrolling.
Right.
And by the way, the Medicaid increase is going to almost equal. Oh, so you know what? What that means is that the costs of the entire scheme, if fewer people are signing up, which is driving costs down, but Medicaid is going up, what that means is the costs are essentially staying the same, but fewer people are signing up, meaning that on a per person basis, the costs are actually higher than they thought.
Well, just back to this, recent estimate, $50,000 per, I want to say person, but it may be, per enrollee, if you will, which would include however many family members there are. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, obviously an economist. You don't even have to understand risk management and transfer of risk and the whole bit to understand that everything they said about, more health care for more people, less money, guaranteed insurability, nirvana, Planet Unicorn is going to happen with Obamacare. It couldn't happen. It never could happen, and it won't.
Is there any possible world that this thing is even close, Mike, even close to being what they had promised and thought it would be? I mean, is there any aspect of it?
No, I mean, just look at, first of all, we're under a minute, but the people that get like really in dire need of serious surgery, foreign kings, whatever, where do they come? U.S. Where do people from Canada try to come? Where do people from Europe try to come for healthcare? I mean, yeah, just do the math and figure it out. Dude, take us out, man.
All right, folks. So you have been listening to Econ Analysis 101 and political reactionary speak with the right mics. We'll be right back.
This is Vigilant Liberty Radio News from Independent Journal Review